Tensions were growing high throughout the country since the South seceded, and then, on April 12, 1861, the first shot of the Civil War was fired, starting the Battle of Fort Sumter and the Civil War itself. Let's start off with the Union blockade and the Anaconda Plan. According to the Georgia Encyclopedia, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln's call at the start of the war for a naval blockade of the entire southern coastline took time to materialize, but by early 1862, under Union General Winfield Scott's Anaconda Plan, the Union Navy had positioned a serviceable fleet off the coast of the South's most prominent Confederate ports. In Georgia, Union strategy centered on Savannah, the state's most significant port city. Beyond Savannah, Union forces generally focused on securing bases of operation on outlying coastal islands to counter Confederate privateers. And according to Britannica, Anaconda Plan, military strategy proposed by Union General Winfield Scott early in the American Civil War. The plan called for a naval blockade of the Confederate littoral, a thrust down the Mississippi, and a strangulation of the South by Union and naval forces. There were also blockade runners, ships that managed to enter or leave a blockaded port. Next is the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation declared that all persons held as slaves within the Southern states are, and henceforward shall be free. However, the proclamation only applied to seceded states. It was pretty limited. Even though it did not end slavery, it captured the hearts of many Americans and changed the course of the war. The proclamation also announced that black soldiers are accepted to join the Union Army, which led to almost 200,000 black soldiers to be in the Army by the end of the war. Next is the Battle of Chickamauga. I'm sorry if I absolutely butchered the name, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. The battle took place on September 18th to 20th, 1863, and it is the largest battle fought in Georgia. It is also considered to be the second bloodiest battle in the Civil War, behind Philadelphia. The city of Chattanooga was a crossroads for 4 railroads. Lincoln believed that if the Union took over Chattanooga, very important Confederate supply lines would be cut off. General Braxton Bragg devised a plan to surprise the Union Army, and it worked. The Confederates won, and there was an estimated 34,624 casualties. Later on was Sherman's Atlanta campaign. General Joseph E. Johnston had to keep General William T. Sherman from taking over Atlanta, the Confederates' second most important city. There were 4 reasons why Sherman was so confident in his success. He had more troops than the Confederates, he was able to keep his armies fed, clothed, and armed, superior morale, and Johnston had a record of being a pretty bad general. Due to the Confederate Army not doing so well, Confederate President Jefferson Davis fired Johnston and replaced him with John B. Hood. Hood had promised that he would keep Atlanta from falling. After Hood took charge, Sherman had cut off 3 railroad lines that supplied his army. He was also outnumbered 80,000 to 50,000. Once Sherman cut off Jonesboro, Hood had no choice but to flee from Atlanta. I'm sure everyone knows Sherman's March to the Sea. General William T. Sherman went around and pillaged many cities in the Confederate States. It lasted from November 15th to December 21st, 1864. The march started in Atlanta and ended in Savannah, both of which are in Georgia. But there is one Confederate city that was not harmed during this pillage. That's the city of Madison. The city still exists and it has many buildings from the 1800s. 2,300 Confederates died and the Union had 1,000 less. Around 17,000 to 25,000 slaves were freed, too. This finally leads us on to Andersonville Prison. The Andersonville Prison was a prison/camp designed to keep Union soldiers in a more secure place. The prison was also named Camp Sumter. Although the camp was only in operation for a year and 2 months, 45,000 Union soldiers were imprisoned and nearly 13,000 died. Sergeant Samuel Corthell remembered, "The camp was covered with vermin all over. You could not sit down anywhere. You might go and pick the lice all off of you, and sit down for half a moment and get up and you would be covered with them. In between these 2 hills, it was very swampy, all black mud, and where the filth was emptied, it was all alive. There was a regular buzz there all the time, and it was covered with large white maggots."